former high-flying Wall Street stockbroker whose life story is being made into a movie is currently in South Africa. The man known as the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, spent 2 years behind bars for manipulating the stock market and is now a motivational speaker. Jordan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, let's start off with some of the news that has been flowing through, of course, the markets. I mean, we're still seeing troubles with the Bank of America. A lot of people still concerned about the ratings agencies and the role that they played. Looking at the crisis that just played out and, of course, being very much part of the markets for many years, what is your view about what's playing out on a global level?
I think the biggest problem is that U.S. government kind of stemmed the whole foreclosure crisis from happening. They intervened and didn't allow certain banks to go out of business that should have went out of business. And what you still have is toxic mortgages that are still polluting many portfolios out there. So there's uncertainty. And as long as there's uncertainty in the market, especially in the real estate market in the United States right now, people are saying, well, this is overhang. When are these houses going to go back on the market? And until they do, people are not going to feel secure about the prices of their homes, which stops people from really spending money. So this consumer spending has been hit dramatically, and in the United States it makes up almost 2/3 of the economy. So we're in this sort of catch-22. You know, people don't want to have homes foreclosed because it's bad. You don't want people, being thrown out of their houses. But that being said, you have to sort of reach some bottom before you can actually start building for the long term again. In terms of the rating agencies and the role they play, well, it's pretty obvious that the rating agencies were, asleep at the switch, and at some level were kind of in on the game because they, even were exposed publicly of, for stamping things AAA they knew were garbage, which allowed the, brokerage firms to sell it around the world and, kind of spread the virus. So that's really the long and short of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said, played the game. And I think there's a lot of, concerns about speculators in the market and what role they play. And of course, as we said earlier, you've been very involved in the market. You've written a book about some of your troubles. You were jailed for 2 years for rogue trading. We also hear a lot of news about rogue traders still being convicted and indicted at this point in time. So it seems that it is very much part of the market. How much of all of this that is playing out on a global level on the stock markets is actually due to rogue trading? How often does it occur? Because we only hear about the things that actually hit the markets and hit the media, but we don't really know what's happening behind closed doors.
I think that the percentage of trades or traders that are rogue traders or like they have bad intentions is very small. The problem is that due to the nature of leverage and markets themselves, that even a very small percentage of fraud gets magnified dramatically through derivatives and things like credit default swaps. So what would be a little problem if there was no leverage becomes a massive problem when you bring leverage into the game. The SEC, I never had much respect for them at all. If you read my book, I don't know if you ever have it, but I was kind of really, talking very ironical about the SEC because they were not the sharpest tools in the shed. And conversely, the actual Justice Department in the U.S. is very sharp, but they don't regulate the markets until it gets kind of to the next level. I think that on some level here, the SEC needs to really, ramp up not just so much enforcement, but the use of technology to kind of catch trends quicker, because you can really see these, these aberrant trades early on if they just advance their technology and were more diligent there versus coming in after the fact.
Well, you're talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission in the U.S. Do you think that they've upped their game now? Do you think they're doing enough?
Maybe a little bit. I'm skeptical. I don't think it could have gotten worse than it was with Bernie Madoff, who was running wild and was their friend, so to speak, right? He was part of the club. Yeah, I think the intentions are, I knew Mary Shapiro, who was the SEC chairman, and she's diligent and she's smart, but there's also a corporate bureaucracy there, a corporate culture that was really one of inaction and one of complacency, especially when it came to the larger firms that really, were considered like so-called the white shoe firms. Some of that's melting away right now, but I think more change is needed and more diligence is needed.
Well, looking at CDS's CDOs, I mean, you mentioned them a little earlier. We're starting to see a lot more regulation coming through when it comes to the banking sector, and I think a lot of people are up in arms about it because it does mean less margins and less profits down the line. Do you think that that is a step in the right direction?
I don't think it'll end up meaning less margins or less profits. I think they'll make more profits. If you look back at history, every time you've had an unregulated market where it kind of traded in the dark behind closed doors, there was always massive fraud. By the nature of the game, if a market's not transparent, if there's huge difference in bid and ask, there's going to be fraud involved. And every time you've had a market, take the NASDAQ, when the NASDAQ upped their game and went from being in the dark ages with bigger spreads and kind of trading by appointment only, and they upped it with the technology, made it real time, the NASDAQ volume soared, and people made more money. I believe that if this market, the CDOs and CDSs really gets updated and you can track it, I think more money will flow into it and more money will be made as a result of it without the shenanigans that are going on or have gone on in the past.
Let's touch on the French rogue trader that was recently sentenced to 2 years in prison and, of course, a €5 billion fine, Jerome Kerviel, and also saying that Societe Generale is, of course, his employer, was very much involved in this rogue trading. Do you think that these big corporations have quite a lot of leeway when it comes to what traders are doing on a day-to-day basis? And of course, you can just bring in your experience as well, and of course, your operations that you conducted in the early 90s.
Well, I think they better. If you're running a brokerage firm of like a Societe Generale and you don't have systems in place where some guy who just has a trading box of X and he's trading 100 times X and he's doing it for months or years, if you don't know about that, then you should be out of business. So my sense is that the brokerage firms mostly know what's going on, but what happens is there's all these different layers of management, and this person's watching that person, and someone that's smart can, like a Clavel, if he wants to be manipulative, he can slip some trades through the cracks. But for it to spiral out of control to become billions of dollars, I don't think that ever happened. It doesn't take one person. It's got to be more than one person that's turning the other way. It just can't happen.
Well, Jordan, tell us about Stratton Oakmont and, from rogue trader to motivational speaker. I mean, obviously, it's a long journey that you've experienced and you've been burnt quite extensively. What is the biggest lesson that you've learned so far?
For me, I think in terms of, greed not being good, because I came into the market in the late 80s in the wake of Gordon Gekko and bought into that notion of greed being good, and it's ambition that's good. Greed, when that takes hold, ethics go flying out the window. My journey, through Wall Street, then becoming a motivational speaker, and I do a lot of sales training and entrepreneurship training for corporations and individuals. I do seminars, I do the whole thing, and the thing that I hit on was a system of selling and motivating people. In terms of what I did wrong in the market, it was really just about front-running trades and then getting really, really greedy about making maybe 40, 50 million a year, and that wasn't enough. I wanted to make even more.
The pump and dump strategy that you
that's a front-running pump and dump strategy, correct. And that being said, that was going on at other firms. It doesn't make it right what I was doing. In fact, it was very wrong, but I rationalized it. And the problem is, and again, we saw this with companies like Lehman Brothers and AIG, that you could be, 95% of my firm was legit. It was 5% that was illegit. That's enough to destroy the entire organism. So I think the lesson to be learned by my company or a Lehman Brothers, especially making it more recent, or an AIG, is that you can't run a company that's almost legitimate, like 98% is perfect, but 2% is fraudulent. The 2% will destroy you every single time.
Well, I listened to you speak on Monday earlier this week, and you were talking about Richard Branson, of course, being relatively interested in your sales tactics. Right. It is quite interesting because it is about being a seller and ensuring that you can sell and market yourself. Tell us about how that strategy has changed for you down the line, and also what kind of things you teach people to make money legitimately, and of course there's a fine line between greed and ambition.
Right. I mean, the fine line is really ethics, and on that level of greed versus ambition, the idea is, number one, is to look to give value first and make money as a result of that. In other words, I used to always say, how do I make money? How do I make money?
Quick.
If that's well,
isn't that what you
the
say?
only way to get rich is quick, but that's not through a get-rich-quick scheme. What takes time is you have to line up certain elements of success. There's entrepreneurship, there's learning to perfect sales, marketing, how to leverage yourself. That's on the outer world. In the inner world, your ability to manage your emotional state, the beliefs that you have, your ability to focus on your outcome, your vision. So what I teach people to do when I give a seminar or just in a corporate setting, I will show people the elements of success, show them how to line them up, and then eventually you'll get rich quick, but it takes time. The work has to be done before you get rich. It's not a scheme, but I have a belief that any person that has the desire and the vision and is willing to take the time to learn to invest in themselves, to learn the skills of entrepreneurship, to become a master salesperson, and again, like whether it's a Richard Branson or any other successful, like a Warren Buffett will say, the most important skill to master in your life is persuasion. Without that, you could have the greatest idea, but it will die on your lips.
Jordan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.